This is the point in time during the season where you got to look at roster cut downs. We're going to look at the offensive guys, look at a list of 25 guys that possibly could be on the bubble of making his team. We'll look at that as well as 25 on defense. And in the last segment, what we'll do is we'll talk about philosophy. Where did the Browns go in terms of the philosophy of how they want to construct this roster, whether it's heavy on running backs, tight ends, or receivers? We'll talk about that all coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen, whether it is on your favorite podcast platform. Make sure you follow and subscribe to the show, or of course now on YouTube. The growth over there has been fantastic. Certainly excited about it, and as Garrett and I will always say, certainly not satisfied with it to this point. We are trending towards the final Browns preseason game of 2021, week 3, Saturday night, facing the Chicago Bears. And yes, the Browns roster is now currently at 80. By next week, they're going to have to get that down 27 names to 53. I think we're getting to the point now where you can probably say it's basically down to about, maybe 7, 8 players, if that. So we're going to break all that down here first on the offensive side of the ball, then on the defensive side of the ball here. Garrett's going to talk a little roster construction in segment 3, maybe where it's going to differ this year as opposed to years of the past. And we're going to touch on the tight end position there. And I have some thoughts maybe on the tight end position that we're going to, close that out with as well. Looking at it, I think, basically what we're going to say is your Browns are going to go into this with 2 quarterbacks, Jacoby Brissett, Josh Dobbs. So there's 2 of probably what you're looking at about 25 guys on the offensive side of the ball. Running backs and wide receivers, this is where it's going to get interesting. Demetric Felton, there's been some praise of his work in the slot, and this is something he did at UCLA before he transitioned back to running back. The Browns basically drafted him saying, we think he's a playmaker. We're not sure exactly where yet, but his biggest and only success really for the Browns to this point has been as a slot receiver. So you look at Demetric Felton, he's basically maybe going to be your 4.5 running back, but also maybe your 5.5 wide receiver, Chubb, Hunt, Dearness Johnson, Jerome Ford, and you put Felton in there, and that gives you 4.5 players there. The wide receiver position, Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Anthony Schwartz, David Bell. Then you mentioned, Felton, that gets you to 4.5 there. Gives you the opportunity for players to battle out there, whether it's Javon Wims, whether it's Baldwin, who's currently going through a concussion. We'll see what the fate of Michael Woods is going to be. To the Browns maybe throw him on a short-term IR, because if he's not on the practice field today, I don't think the Browns are going to rush him back to play this week. To then maybe stash him for a month till Michael Woods is, ready to give a better accountability of his talent. There is Michael Hartley, who got a little run, Sunday against the Eagles. So what are these guys? Will find a way to make the final roster. So you figure the Browns at the wide receiver position is probably going to be 5.5. Javon Wims is interesting. He's played in the league. He's had some success. This could maybe be a guy that scratches here for the time being. Offensive line, we know the starters from left to right. It's Wills, Batonio, Prosike, then, of course, Wyatt Miller, then, of course, Jack Conklin, Chris Hudson as probably your first left guard, right tackle. James Hudson, left tackle, right tackle, has that flexibility. Michael Dunn is probably locked down this backup center spot. Then they also have Blake Hance, who, is going to also fill in on the interior if he's needed there. That gives you 9 offensive linemen. Then you get to the tight end room. David Njoku, Harrison Bryant are going to be here. If you're looking for tight end 3, I think Nakia Griffin-Stewart has looked the best of this bunch to this point. He does have NFL experience. And Johnny Stanton becomes another one here, Garrett, where it's a little bit difficult because you could look at Johnny Stanton and say, 3.5, your 4th tight end, but half tight end. When you do go to goal line in short yardage situations, you might want a fullback there. Do you go the Johnny Stanton route? Do you use a Nakia Griffin-Stewart? Do you maybe use a Kareem Hunt? But I think there'd be a fighting chance for Stanton. And I think I wasn't one that was truly thought it was going to be that way, but it certainly could work out that way. Then you look at the other, offensive line. Alex Taylor has had a really, really nice camp. Do the Browns want to go 10 deep at the offensive line position? They have in the past. And the only reason you do that is because you feel these guys have the ability to play, which you certainly get from a coach like Bill Callahan. But that's where we're getting to it. I mean, there's going to be a couple of these names that we just mentioned here left off, and not necessarily saying the Browns are going to keep 25, but when you try to put together a 53-man roster, basically you go 25 on offense, 25 on D, understanding they're going to have 3 on special teams. But for me, I think we're down to like a nitty-gritty of, what are these receivers, whether it's Wims, Baldwin, Woods, Hartley, a guy like Alex Taylor, Johnny Stanton, certainly in that mix. These guys are all battling it out right now. And, most of them to see significant playing time Saturday night. Not sure if the Browns' minds are made up yet, but these are certainly going to be the guys battling each other out to fill out that offensive room for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I think Wims, when you look at it from the receiver standpoint, this is going to be the most difficult one because you got guys like Hartley, you got guys like Wims, and they're beginning to play in the time because David Bell and Schwartz have been out. But you also have to look and really, really get to a point where you say, okay, let's look at some of these receivers. You have Amari Cooper. You're going to have Anthony Schwartz. You have David Bell, but past that, and obviously Donovan Peoples-Jones. So Wims is a guy that I'm looking at could be a casualty. You also look at a guy like Jamarcus Bradley. I don't know. He just always seems to be a guy that's just always on the squad, whether or not somebody gets hurt. I think you accurately point out that Demetric Felton is a kind of a half receiver, half returner, half running back. So since he does have that versatility, I think his name is a guy that is going to be safe on this team. But when you look at it, you have Aesop Winston, and I think the guy who is going to be safe, but we haven't seen him, is Mike Woods. I look at his cap number, right? Doesn't have a huge cap number. He got a $700,000 some dollar out salary or whatever, a little bit of bonus, 42,000. But one of the things about Mike Woods is he really impressed people by what he was able to do when all those other receivers were out. He was holding it down. He was a guy that the coaching staff was really excited about. So I think you end up with Mike Woods making this team. And then you get to Mike Hartley Jr. He's Dalen Baldwin is another guy. So for me, I think they take 6 receivers, but it's kind of like we only going to take 5 plus Demetric Felton is kind of a half. So I think that they would end up taking. I think they'll get 5, maybe 6 at the most at a receiver in the receiving core.
Well, the tricky part with Mike Woods is, it's not a season-ending injury, so you can't put him on IR yet because then you can't bring him back. But the other thing is, because he's a rookie, you subject him to being claimed by waivers. When he first went down, the Browns said it was going to be some time, and they said it was significant. So if you're talking hamstring, and it's probably been 2 weeks now for Mike Woods being down, you're talking 6 to 8 weeks, which could say, hey, first 4 weeks of the season, maybe Mike Woods is on IR. You'd hate to see it for the kid, obviously, because he was showing well. But, he is missing so much. And you even got to remember when Mike Woods was playing, that's when Deshaun Watson was practicing as the number 1 quarterback for this team. Vastly different now where it is, Jacoby Brissett and Josh Dobbs getting a ton of reps. I'm not ready to move on from Mike Woods. I want to see at least a fair fighting chance for him. So I think hopefully that would be the path for Mike Woods. Then you get to other guys who might, possibly end up as far as, scout team, that type of thing and it comes down to maybe, do you like Alex Taylor enough where you're going to go 10 at the offensive line position? And it's nice that Alex Taylor has showed well, it is, but it's not like the Browns haven't had him in and out of here like 4 or 5 times already. Is he vastly improved in the Browns' eyes? Or, are they confident with the 9 offensive linemen they have? And that's not discounting whether or not the fact they go, outside the building to maybe bring one more in.
Yeah, and that's another thing we bring up in this. Great point. You just said it. They like the guys, and some guys could be, possibly on the 53, but it all depends on who else is getting cut out there. They always have an opportunity to look outside of the building and say, hey, look, we want another guy to bring them in to compete, or whether that we feel it's a veteran or a young guy that has some promise that another team was unfortunately, had to cut and let go. So those are always things that another conversation or another layer to this conversation, because you're going to look around to see on the waiver wire, guys who got cut. Some guys are going to be out there that can potentially help you at defensive tackle or wide receiver, the two-man areas of need for the Cleveland Browns.
So we'll see how it all shakes out. Browns going to have many decisions here, through the weekend leading up to late Tuesday afternoon. As they take this, roster from 80 to 53. And it's certainly not like years past where, Browns fans, even myself as host of this, was just kind of like, who are we actually keeping? Because there really ain't talent here. And hopefully we can go shop, basically on everybody's front yard after they make their cuts. Certainly going to be a different round here for the Browns with this cut day coming up here in 2022. We're going to get back here. We're going to talk a little bit about how do we think it's going to shake out here, the defensive side of the ball. Garrett Bush from the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, your host, Jeff Lloyd, as well. Your latest Locked On Browns. Life is full of twists and turns, and it's important to show up for yourself through it all. As many of you know, I've suffered some serious, significant losses in the last few years, whether it was my older brother, my father, my mother-in-law. It's been really, really difficult to, get through everyday life, try to be the best husband I can be for my wife, try to be the best father I can to my girls. So that's why you look out and look for places like BetterHelp Online. BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs. It can match you with one of your own licensed professional therapists in less than 48 hours. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your therapist. With therapy, it can take a few tries to find the right one for you. BetterHelp makes it easy and free to charge therapists if needed. BetterHelp is a great way to invest in yourself. Visit their website and read the testimonials that are posted daily. Folks just going on and on about the difference the folks at BetterHelp have made in their lives, how quickly the response time is, how there is, basically cutting off if it ends up being a longer session or a longer, message exchange back and forth, that they've always been there for them in any way they needed. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they're recruiting additional therapists in all 50 states. They have a special offer for our listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at betterhelp.com/lockedon.
Welcome back to Locked On Browns. Third preseason game coming up here. Third and final for the Cleveland Browns before 1 week off, before getting strapped up and set to go September 11th against the Carolina Panthers down in Charlotte, North Carolina. If you want to be a part of the most hip, the most happening, and the right now updates, news, and analysis for the Cleveland Browns, there's no better place to get it than Locked On Browns podcast. Make sure you go ahead and salute and subscribe to the channel, and go ahead hit that notification bell, and definitely hit the like button, which helps get our content out to everyone else. So we'll continue to do that throughout the entirety of the season. We're just getting started here, and please don't forget to continue to make us your first listen of the day anywhere you download your podcast. Jeff, we talked about the offensive spectrum. Offensive positions out there that could potentially have some cuts in it. We're going to break down the defensive side of the football now. To me, the most up in their position when you look at it is a defensive tackle position, and as well as some of the linebackers there as well. Jeff, go through. What are some of the guys on the list of defensive guys that could possibly have some position and roster of positions available for players?
Now when we're doing this, you basically, again, you're trying to get your way to basically 25. We'll get to the defensive backs, but you figure about 10 names there. Something can certainly change. Starting with the D end room. You go, of course, Myles Garrett, you go to Jadady and Clowney. I think both rookies are going to be safe. We know Alex Wright is going to be safe. Isaiah Thomas, I'll be honest with you, if you were a 7th round rookie that the Browns didn't maybe think much of, they would care less whether or not you were out there practicing with a cast on your hand. Isaiah Thomas is out there getting it done. And off of a strong first week of preseason, then breaking a hand or having a cat on it, birth of his child, back out there today, hopefully to show out well Saturday night. I think this is interesting with saying the two rookies are safe. And Chase Winovich hasn't done a lot here over the last couple of weeks, and it's great that you were a participant in the early part of camp, but not being part of the preseason games. It's created a chance for Rochelle to show his name here. And you look at these guys both size-wise. Rochelle is more in line with what the Browns are looking for at the position, a little bit more length, a little more meat on the bone, so to speak. Winovich a little bit smaller, a la, Tack McKinley last year. Rochelle's got 9.5 career sacks. Chase Winovich has got 11. Winovich didn't have any last year. So it's not like either one of these guys have a track record that's going to flip, the decision for the Browns either way. So you look at this, and for the Browns, who's could be that fifth edge, because I think they'll probably keep 5. Defensive tackle, look, I think we know. I've got 4 that are going to make it. I don't think anybody's overly all geeked about it, but I think at the end of the day, I think it's going to be Jordan Elliott. I think it's going to be Tavon Bryan. It's going to be Perrion Winfrey. It's going to be Tommy Togiai. There's really nobody else in that room. Maybe Glenn Logan kind of showed well last week, but as we talked with John Costco, he looked the best of a weak bunch. It's not like he looked overall good. He was just the best of a bad bunch. You get to the linebacker position, and first things first, you just look at the way the Browns depth chart is. They list 4 starting linebackers. They only play 3. So, J.O.K., Jacob Phillips, Anthony Walker, Sione Takitaki, all locks. I think Tony Fields has played well and impressed to this point. So I think there's a spot where, Tony Fields probably sticks around here and is going to make this team. And Dakota Allen was brought in specifically because he's a special teamer and a plus special teamer. So that gives you right off the bat 9 on the defensive line, 6 at the linebacker position, puts you at 15, which gets to your secondary numbers. Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, Martin Emerson, Greedy Williams, AJ Green. These 5 guys are all locks. Safety position, Grant Delpit's a lock, John Johnson's a lock, Ronnie Harrison, Richard LeCount. That gets you right there to 9 defensive backs. So you get to maybe a Herb Miller, Anthony Bell battling each other out. Do they go an extra defensive end early? So does maybe Chase Winovich or Rochelle both make the team? Do they find a way to keep the kid from the USFL, Chris Odom? So these are some names that are be battling it out here. Look, health will sometimes dictate this situation going into the first week or two. If you're dinged up in a position, you're going to maybe have to carry an extra body. But I think, we're pretty firm here on these guys who are going to stay. Herb Miller's had kind of a nice camp. I think Anthony Bell has been a guy that's really, probably taken people, by storm. But, like we were talking about yesterday with John Costco, if you're going to be as old as he is as a rookie, you better come in and know everything and know exactly what you're doing. And I think that's what's impressed with Bell. Do they like the fact that maybe they could go Rochelle or they could go Winovich, and when they go nickel and dime in obvious pass rushing situations, you could kick Garrett inside, you could kick Clowney inside, if not kick them both inside. No, Browns have options here, and it's going to be a little more difficult on defense because I think there's been some guys who've had a decent camp to this point, Garrett, and basically at the end of the day, it's going to be musical chairs that there's just not going to be enough chairs for.
Yeah, this is always the tough part about it. Those musical chairs coming up and having defensive backs where you can't have enough defensive backs. You just can't. I look at a couple of years ago, I remember MJ Stewart getting the opportunity to play and a lot of other guys getting minutes to play.
Robert Jackson starting a playoff game at cornerback.
Crazy. I don't even know who that was. I looked at it, I was like, Robert Jackson? That's not that sounds like a law firm or something, the law firm of Robert Jackson and Associates. I don't know. You look at it, and I thought the second thing that really stands out is the fact that they got 4 linebackers listed like they're running a 4-4 or something. Like the old school high school defense where we got 4 linebackers, 4 defensive linemen, because people weren't throwing the football. So I think what that basically means is, they're going to be on the base downs. You're going to see a lot of Anthony Walker on your passing downs. I think you might see Phillips. You might see Taki a little more in that as well. The defensive tackle room to me is pretty cut, dry, and simple. You can get those 4 that you listed, and I think there's maybe 1 or 2 positions, maybe 1, because it's usually 5 defensive tackles they keep. I think there may be 1 more guy who has the opportunity to kind of get into the rotation and make the traveling squad, so to speak. And then defensive ends. I think you got Isaiah Thomas, but you got Wright, you got Chase Winovich, and you got Myles Garrett, you got Clowney. So I think there may be possibly 1 more position available for a defensive end that comes out there and wants to do it. Curtis Weaver is a guy who is on notice. We're gonna see what you got, Kirk, because right now that might be out of here. Right, there's a lot of cats might be out of here. So I think when you look at the offensive side of the football as well as the defensive side of the football, I think it's way less positions available on the, I would say, on the defensive side of the football than offense. There's very few spots available. Backers, you're not going to creep up into that. Secondaries, they got the two deep ready to go. The only position I can see where somebody creeps up and steals playing time is maybe defensive tackle, because they just don't have any proven track record. So I think the defense is a little bit further along than the offense.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head here. And one thing we've been talking about with everything that everybody wants to speak negatively about this team is they don't want to talk about the defensive side of the ball. And we just literally rattled off all these names without any questions of anything. I mean, these guys are all solid, good football players. For a lot of them, they've played here. This is now the second year at the Browns. They played in unison. They understand each other well. I can think it's definitely, with some firm stoutness, can say that this defense is probably done. Yeah, I'm sure for Joe Woods, he probably knows exactly, question he's going to have is he's going to pull on Coach Stefanski and say, can I get another one on the defensive side of the ball? Because maybe I'm sure there's, he'd probably hate to lose a guy like DeAnthony Bell, because I think DeAnthony Bell can go right to a poor team and probably find a roster spot right away, at least the way he showed for the Browns. People have talked well about the games, but he's also had a couple pick sixes in practices, DeAnthony Bell, that not a lot of people keep, bringing up here. We're going to talk a little bit here about maybe, on the offensive side of the ball, some changing within basically the roster structure on the offensive side of the ball is going to be this year. Garrett's going to, give you a list of thoughts on that. I've got some thoughts here on the tight ends and the way maybe this 11 personnel is going to work for Coach Stefanski. All that more. Jeff, Lloyd, Garrett Bush, your latest Locked On Browns. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information. From live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts, they have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Welcome back to the Locked On Browns podcast. G Bush here, Jeff Lloyd here. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and follow us on Twitter at GBush91 and at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. Now, let's get to the philosophical differences between what the Cleveland Browns wanted to do last year compared to what they want to do this year. Because I think when you look at those differences, you can try to read the tea leaves into how they want to build this roster, stack this roster, and go about putting, players together to make the most cohesive unit. Now, when we look at the tight end position, tight end was something that Kevin Stefanski has been known to covet. You look at Austin Hooper, you look at Harrison Bryant, and then you got David Njoku last year. 3 tight ends, all of them were, before the season, if you'd asked one of the stronger units, we would have definitely said tight end, because they have 3 different distinctive tight ends that do different things differently. So I looked at that situation and said, okay, you like the tight ends, but the one thing that you have to do as a coach is you have to adapt to who you actually already have. So right now, running backs is a plenty. Right now, you don't have very many targets at receiver, and you have 2 good tight ends. So if I'm going to devote a roster spot, right, to I'm devoting a roster spot to tight ends, I'm going to need to utilize them. I'm going to need them to actually be the focal point of my offense. But that's just not what you have here. You got 2 decent tight ends, but you don't got Anthony Gonzalez and I don't even know who else. Kelsey. You ain't got Tony Kelsey and Gronk. That's not who you got right now. So what you have to do is be true to what your identity is, and be true to what your playmakers do well on your team. So this year, I don't think that you're going to see 3 tight ends and a fullback on this roster. I just don't. I think that's the reason they gave Njoku the money, so they can say he's one of our main guys, and we'll work around that. But in terms of overall, I don't think they're going to be an emphasis on fullbacks and tight ends like it was in the past under Kevin Stefanski, because he doesn't have that same type of personnel. So he's going to have to reinvent himself, do things off consistency, like off of track. So, sometimes you go to exactly what you want to do and run. Sometimes you got to go off track to throw off the tendencies in order to get people to, stay off the line of scrimmage and be, and just be overall creative when you call them plays.
I agree with you where we're going to notice some differences as far as tight end usage. For me, it even goes a little further than that. We talked with John Costco yesterday. The Browns seem to be going with a lot of 11 personnel, and it's not that they didn't do that. They always played the tight ends, but normally it was fullback, so sometimes it was even 22 personnel. I think it's going to be the way you actually physically use them. Look, David Njoku and Harrison Bryant are both more athletic than what they thought they had in Austin Hooper. I think there's going to be scenarios where these guys maybe are lined up on the outside. Maybe wide receivers are lined up on the inside. David Njoku has that athleticism. Harrison Bryant went to college as a wide receiver, developed into a tight end, so has familiarity playing on the outside. Had a big reception last year. I think it was week 2 against the Texans, where he lined up as an outside wide receiver. If you saw Kyle Pitts the other night for the Falcons, dust a defensive back from the Jets. You're bigger, you're faster. As a defensive back, the thought process is, oh, well, let me try to get a jam in on him. Well, wait a minute. The guy was 240 pounds. If I jam him, he's going to drop me. He's just going to drop me. So what do I do then? And the next thing you know, the tight end is able to get a move on. I think there's going to be a lot of flexibility in how they're used. We can use terms like 11 personnel, meaning that, those guys will be out there. One running back, they'll all be out there. But the question is going to be is how they're physically used. David Bell, we know, has experience from the slot. Anthony Schwartz, we've seen him play some slot, where there's 2 tight ends on the outside, 2 wide receivers on the inside, any way you want to do it here. And I think that it's probably one of the things that Coach Stefanski is most excited about here is it's not going to be as vanilla as same personnel lining up in the same places as it was maybe in the last 2 years, which should certainly help Jacoby Brissett. Anything different you were showing to prospective opponents that the Browns have not shown yet, Coach Stefanski doesn't have on any film yet. Certainly going to have guys on defense going to have their heads spinning. But I think that's the advantage the Browns have with basically Njoku making the jump, Harrison Bryant making the jump into his spot is they do block, and they do block pretty well, but both are athletic receiving tight ends that should be big factors here. And maybe we should understand the fact that we're not going to just see them in the comfortable roles or lining up where we felt comfortable with them lining up over the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, you got to diversify. And I think this gives another layer that you can do. And this is one of the reason I'm so adamant that they get Kareem Hunt involved and they move him around wherever they need to be. Because one of the things, if you get Kareem Hunt on the field, it's going to open up things for Nick Chubb at the same time. It's going to open up the throws to Amari Cooper. It's going to open up the seam route to David Njoku. So the more I think that the Browns could be creative and the more that they can, use that expression to put people in the best position and to utilize the mismatches that you have all over this field, I think they'll be okay. And I think their philosophy should change, rightfully so. If you got Deshaun Watson, you're not going to be coming out here playing dink and duck, right? You're not coming out here to just play patty cake. You're coming out here to put points on the board. And I think you'll start to see Kevin Stefanski kind of move away from that 11 personnel, some of the 12 personnel, even sometimes 13 personnel. He'll move more, hopefully, is to the 21 personnel, 2 backs, 1 tight end. All those different things are on the table. And I really think that for the Browns to be successful, they're going to have to reinvent themselves and continue to do it week in and week out.
It's all part of what's going to be the next form of Coach Stefanski here. And when you made this move for Deshaun Watson, even though it's going to be a minute, there's basically the thought process is that Coach Stefanski wasn't able to get to everything in his playbook that he wanted to. You got Hooper out of here, made that tight end room more athletic. You got the headaches out of here at the wide receiver position. You brought in somebody like Amari Cooper who's going to do everything you ask. David Bell should hopefully replace a little bit what you lost in Jarvis Landry. Find a way to utilize this, sensational speed of Anthony Schwartz, and hopefully he catches the ball. There's the opportunity for change here. And we'll start to see it maybe if not Saturday night, hopefully September 11th in Carolina facing the Panthers. Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show panel host Garrett Bush. The Barbershop 92.3 The Fan. Saturday mornings, numerous other appearances to catch Garrett over there on 92.3 The Fan. Make sure you're following at GBush91. Me personally at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. Show itself, Locked On Browns, follow back account. DMs are open. As everybody knows here, this is just the tip of the iceberg here as we're going through these next few days of preseason, building up towards the regular season 2022 Browns Panthers September 11th. Wow, Baker Mayfield's going to start. Wow, because that was really a newsworthy headline, guys.
Well, we didn't even know that. That was so surprising, dog.
The headline would have been if Baker Mayfield was not starting for the Carolina Panthers Day. That was the headline. But you're just looking forward to it. Juices are flowing here as you can taste real football, just coming right around the corner. Oh, so close, no doubt. Kids starting to go back to school. So all you parents get to enjoy your leisure things a little bit more here. So we're just going to continue the great coverage throughout the week. Obviously next week leading up to the first week of September, heading into, of course, facing the Carolina Panthers. Appreciate everybody makes Locked On Browns their first listen, whether it is on your favorite podcast platform. Make sure you follow and subscribe. Of course, now on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the show, notifications on. So as soon as the content drops, it is there for you to digest. All that being said, this has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go Browns.